Let me open developer console. Close. We have a concept called Apex class. I'll name my class is account batch class. Account batch.
We can't see the screen.
Okay.
Can't see the screen now.
Okay, perfect. So in account batch, we need to implement an interface provided by Salesforce. We have an interface provided by Salesforce called implements. Implements database dot batchable. You can see database dot batchable and pass it to S object because you can run your batch classes on S objects, so you can pass it to batch class. What this interface will contain? This interface will contain three methods. This
So
interface
this
will,
one you are writing directly on the class, sorry, on the developer console.
yeah, because my VS Code is taking a lot of time to load, so I thought like for a time I'm writing in developer console. See, wherever you write, like it doesn't really matter. Even if you write a VS Code, you have to save to Salesforce. Even if I write here, it will get saved into Apex classes only. Now, let's say here we need to have a start method. Okay. And next one we have execute method. And third one we have finish method. This start method will get a query for, will return query for the records to be processed. In execute method, this will process records chunks by chunk by chunk. What is mean by chunk by chunk? Let's say if I have 50,000 records, you can say in one batch method, one batch execute method will process only 10 records. So 50,000 divided by 10. So how many batches we are getting there? 5,000 batches, right?
Yeah.
After processing 5,000 batches, finish method will acknowledge, will ACK saying that hey, the batch is finished with so and so errors and so many batches. I mean, what is number of batches failed and number of batches passed. But it will only say number of batches failed and number of batches success. But it will not say which records has been failed, which records has been success. Remember that. Let's say if I'm executing 100 batches, 100 execute methods are executing. In that, one execute method got failed, it doesn't mean that the other 99 will fail. 99 will be success because every execution method will take as a new set of governor limits. Let's say in first time, if it consumes like a 10 SOQL limits, if next time if it is running, that time also the SOQL limit starts from 0. It will not start from 10. So every time the execute method will reset the governor limits of Salesforce. Okay, got it?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what I'll do, I'll just cancel it out, save. Let me go to VS Code, Control Shift P. Uh, I can create a class and I can invoke an account batch. Okay, and then I'll retrieve it. Okay, now I got my class which I added from developer console. So here we need to define these methods: start method, execute method, and finish method. This is very important in order to save your batch class. And
So can
database
you say that again? Like first line, like so account batch implements database.
database.batchable. Database.batchable is an interface in Salesforce asynchronous. To write a batch class, this is a syntax that we need to use.
Okay. Okay.
Then only you can say this is a synchronous and asynchronous. Public
Okay.
database dot query locator and then start method. In start method, we'll be having a parameter called database.batchable context. Database.batchable context, and I'll say BC. Batchable context, I'm referring it as a BC. Control Z, okay. And the other method we have here, it will return some query always. It should have a return statement called return. For now, I'm saying return null. And there is other method for you is called void method. Public void execute method. Public void execute execute. Even this method will accept a parameter of 2. What are the two parameters? Database.batchable context, database.batchable context BC colon, and list of records. List of records. Here I wanted to process my account records. I am saying list of account scope. The scope is my list of records. The same way we have other method called finish method. Even void and finish methods are, execute and finish methods are non-return methods. Nothing but they are void methods. Finish and database dot batchable context BC. Database dot batchable context BC. Here the important thing is that you have to query a results and you need to pass it back. It's simple. You can see, let's say string query equal to some query that we'll write later. Now here you can see the syntax called database dot get query locator. There is a method called get query locator and I'm passing my query. Here, because we need to process an account, that's what our expectation. I'll say select ID, name from account. So we can have something like select ID, name from account. Or if you want to pass directly, you can put square brackets and you can say select ID, name from account. Or you can say like even contact ID, contact underscore C, comma, description from account. Either you can write a query as normal by using a curly braces, or you can also pass the query as a string operator. You can also pass a query as a string. Anything is fine. It accepts both the ways. Save. And I'm trying to deploy it now. Deploy this to SourceArc. Now this is being deployed. Now what happens, right? This scope of records will get your number of records to be processed. Here scope will get the account details. Let's say for example, I'll say for a simple example, I'm saying for account ACC colon scope, because my collection I have here in scope. Let's say system.debug account name colon plus acc.name acc.name. Now in finish method I'll write system.debug batch completed. So let's deploy it, and you should know how to execute method. It's not a normal Apex. What is ACC? Not SCC. Let's go to the deployment. Let's refresh our developer console to get the latest data. Arithmetic operations, and let's close this. Open Apex class called account batch in our case. Account batch. So we have all the data, whatever we did. How to invoke this batch class? To invoke this batch class, normally what happens, we used to create an object for a class and then we'll call all our non-static methods, isn't it? But to initiate any batch class, there is a syntax provided. First, you need to create an object for your class. First, we need to create object for your class. Obj equal to new object, new constructor, and then we can say database.execute batch. We can say database.execute batch. Let's say ID batch ID equal to database dot execute batch. There is a concept called database.execute batch, and then you can pass obj. Here I pass my obj and I say I'll execute it. Now if I'm executing it, logs, how many batches has been processed? Let's say serial chunk handler. What is this method? Batch. Let's understand this way. From here to here is a batch class only. It's not different. Debug only. Here we don't have anything. Batch starting. This is batch completed, which is from the finish method, right? And this is like debug statements. We have execute account name and everything we have. And what there is other chunk handler, serial batch range chunk handler. This is the start method. Now what happened? We have all the accounts which is coming in a single batch, single execution. The reason behind the default size of records to be processed is 200 in the batch class. If I want to change to 1, let me change it to 1. I'm executing it. Earlier you had how many serial chunk handlers we have? Only 1 and 2. Now this time, how many records I have in accounts, that many serial chunk handlers it need to generate. Let's say execute. See how many chunk handlers has been created? There are many right now, isn't it?
Yes.
Each chunk handler will have only one record from here on, because I mentioned the each execute method should process only one record. See, Gautam, if I open here, I'll have another account which is like only one. What is the default size for a batch handler if you don't mention here one? The default size will be 200. If I don't mention anything, then the batch size is 200 by default. But you can keep from 1 to 2000 records to be processed in one batch. Okay, this is the limit. But how can I know that whether my batch is success or fail? Let's go to the setup. Go to setup. To execute a batch, you need to use a command called database.execute batch and comma your size of required size of batch, either 10, 20 or 2000 is the final value. In my case, if I mention 2000, so it processes 2000 records at 200 records at one go. Now, to verify in this, here we have an option called Apex Jobs. There is an option called Apex Jobs. If you go inside, then we can realize like 21 records. Total batches is 21. And the first time whenever we executed, how many batches we had? Only one, right? Because this size is 200. Here 21. Why 21? Because we passed the batch size is 1. Let's say collect the data. Select count from account. We'll see how many accounts we have. We should get 21 accounts as a count. 21. It's the same thing that we are seeing here, right? 21. How many batches processed? 21. How many failures we have? 0. What is the start time? 5:59. Submitted time is 5:59 and submit completion time is 5:59. So it doesn't take much time. It's like a very spot because the processing time is very less. We don't have any dependencies. Ideally, you can see, right? So this becomes like a asynchronous now. Yes or no?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
in this, you can write whatever logic you are writing. Like if you want to call your trigger code, or if you want to write anything, you can do. Let's say I wanted to update my ACC dot name equal to ACC dot name plus plus ACC dot name dot split hyphen of 0 plus next time if I run batch, it should not update my system dot now. So whenever batch runs, I'm trying to update my and update scope. This is my class. Deploy it. So what's the account name we had? Gini account name, Gini point. So whenever I run my batch, the Gini point should update with the current time of batch running. That's the expectation. Let's say execute. Refresh. We'll see the batches are processing or not. The batch is completed without any failures. Refresh it. Details. Now we got the time, right? 1345. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Let's take it other example here. Let's take other example. Deepak. Now again I'll execute. For sure, like this 1345 might change for sure, right? So now I'll say Control E, execute batch with 1 as a size. Execute. Refresh. Earlier it is 2021 614 1345. Here also 1345. Now I'm executing. It got processed. Refresh. This is 41. Before it is 1345. Now it is 14. This one. Here you can see 1441. This got updated, and this got updated 1445. So it takes some time to get from Genie Point to Deepak account, isn't it?
Okay.
So why it become time difference? Because we are processing records with a size of 1. If it is a 1, instead of, let's say, if I take a fire engine or pipe, if I spray a water in a air, if I put water force on a air, so it will gonna drench everyone in the group, right? If the group of people are there, it will just fall off, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if I say that, okay, you come, I'll make you water first, and this time, this way, like people will take so much of time, right, to pass water for everyone.
Yeah.
It's the same concept. If it is processing one record, in this second it is processing one record, next second it is processing other record. So what happened? There is a time delay because of independent batches. Clear? Any questions?
Not as of now.
Okay. But anyone, like any of you have any other questions on this? See, whatever we are saying is just a simple example. And let me go back to the batch class and show you something. Like in batch class, if you decided to write a batch class, you need to have a method called implements database.batchable. You need to implement an interface of Salesforce called database.batchable with a S object tagged in it. Okay. And then we have three different methods. We have a start method, we have execute method, and we have a finish method. In start method, you will be writing only the query, SOQL query, nothing else. You will be writing only SOQL query. And execute method, you will get list of records. How many lists you will get? The number of records that you mention here. The number of records you mention here, that many records only you will get every time when the batch executes, okay? Not every time you will get all the records from the query. You will get only those records, whatever number you mention in the query. So you can ask me, I'm not calling my execute method, I'm not calling my start method. This is an interface, as I said. If you call database.execute batch, this method, I mean, this particular call itself will take care like which method should call first and which method should be calling again and again until records completes. As soon as execute method completes successfully with all the batches, I mean, with fail or without fail, then the finish method will execute by saying, hey, batch completed. Clear? And you can ask me what finish method will do. As soon as finish method execute, you can say number of records got failed and why they are failed. So we can capture such logs and we can send an email or update into any object, or else a finished method can also sequence another batch class. You understood this way? Like finish method, let's say first I need to update all account holders and then I need to process the account adding. After adding account, and then I need to process the transaction. So there is a sequence here, right? In my statement, I have a sequence, isn't it?
Yes.
That sequence, what happens? Every time, every steps you do from the execute and finish method, you call the next sequence class by saying database.batchable. The same thing you will do. Database.batchable account, and you will be calling this with some different class. So what happened? As soon as finish method comes, this method will be sequence. But up to how many you can do? Up to 5 you can able to call it. Okay, you can't call more than that. You can call up to 5 batches in the finish method. Clear?